is farther north on the flat Earth? Before we get into that, everybody needs to go back and watch the entire series again, starting with part 1. From the comments that I'm reading, a lot of these concepts are not being fully understood by everyone. Go back and watch the series from the beginning again. And then specifically for this topic, you're going to need to understand 14 through 19 backwards and forward. How light really moves all the way through the shortening of the days. The plasma tube of light spiral is getting tighter through angular momentum. So if it starts off this big, as it increases in speed, the angular momentum is going to tighten that spiral. That tightening is why it's moving north. Remember, the plasma tube of light behaves like a fluid. It spirals. When it increases in speed, it tightens. So remember, arms out, slower, arms in, faster for a figure skater when they're doing their spin. That's angular momentum. So that spiral tightens up, and that's what's causing it to be more north. So if you remember from part 18, when I was talking about the seasons and where the sun goes and everything else, if you're looking down at the flat plane from above, those yellow circles on the blue circle and the green circle are the old furthest south the sun would traverse, and the furthest north being the green line. Okay, that's what it used to be. Well, because of angular momentum and the tightening and speeding up of the spiral, is no longer that. It's no longer the Tropic of Cancer and Capricorn. It's moving north because of the tightening of the spiral. So the green circle would be moved more towards the North Pole, and the blue circle would be moved more towards the north also, because the whole tube of light is getting smaller, tighter. So that's why the sun is now more north than what it used to be, because of that circular rotation that the sun takes is now on new paths because of it getting closer to the north. And to all the naysayers out there that say, oh, the sun's in the same place that it's always been, blah, 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 blah. Well, no, you're wrong. And what you need to do is you need to go get a good compass, okay? And you need to shoot some azimuths to where the sun is, and then you can cross-reference that to what the official United States government, U.S. Navy observation calculations from computers says where it should be. Okay, here's the site. This is what it looks like. The next slide, I'll give you the address to it, and just put the stuff in, where you're at, time, all that good stuff, and it'll tell you exactly what your compass reading should be. And then all you have to do is go out there and shoot it, and you'll see that it's not where it's supposed to be. And the easiest way to do that is not point the compass at the sun. Find a shadow and do it off of a shadow. Put like a stick in a yard, something like that. But yeah, do it off the shadow, not pointing at the sun. Okay, here's that link, and I'll put it in the description also. Okay, that's all I have for today. I have no idea what the next video is going to be about. I'm going to have to sit down and think about that, where I want to go from here. So that's all I got for today. Thank you, everybody, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.
Part 25A, Why the Sun is Wider and Hotter on the Flat Earth. Do you all remember when the sun used to be yellow? Anyone who is over 30 should remember the sun was a lighter shade of yellow, and anyone over 50 remembers it as a darker shade. Well, not anymore. It is a bright white color, and there is no yellow hue in it anymore. Well, the answer to why that is makes perfect sense in the correct model, and makes absolutely no sense in their ridiculous model. The answer is simple. The plasma tube of light is tightening due to angular momentum. Remember, arms out, wide and slower. Arms in, narrow and faster. The tube is getting narrow when it used to be wide. So the surface area of the lens is getting a more focused light. It's less diffuse. Just like when you focus your flashlight, the light will become more intense and brighter. Spot beam is focused and narrow. Flood beam is not focused and wide. So the plasma tube of light that is hitting the lens was wider and is getting more narrow. So the focal point of light is getting more focused and intense. The intensity of the focal point is what is causing the color change. But here is the real kicker. When I finish this series on why the sun is hotter and wider, you will have the biggest sign for when the MCO will happen. Even better than the shortening of the days. Sorry, JC, I have the complete working model. Next video, part 25B, the hotter sun or focal point and global warming on the flat Earth. Part 25B, the hotter sun or focal point and global warming on the flat Earth. The first thing everyone should understand is all numbers can be manipulated to support whatever claim one wants. Any accountant or scientist knows that. Remember, the BS fake numbers of gravity. They just plopped in 96% of their values to make their equations work. You need to learn how to hear what is really being said. And Mia is teaching everyone right now. If you have not become a member on her site, do it now. The controllers will tell you portions of the truth they understand because they know no one will listen. Is global warming real? Yes, it is getting hotter in places. Is global cooling real? Yes, it is getting colder in places. So, is the climate changing? Absolutely, because the sun/focal point of light is tightening. Therefore, the light it produces is more narrow, focused, and hotter. The sunlight of decades ago was wider, so the light and heat were spread out more evenly. The sun now has a more narrow light, which focuses the heat into a smaller area. So the areas that are under the more narrow light for the longest duration will get the more extreme hot weather. And conversely, the areas that are not under the more narrow light as long will get the more extreme cold weather. With the tightening focal point of light and more extreme natural weather, the controllers need to control. How do they do that? Through clouds. Via weather modification. Next video, part 25C, chemtrails and weather modification on the flat Earth. Part 25C, weather modification on the flat Earth. A strategy that accomplishes one objective is good. A strategy that accomplishes multiple objectives is superb. Brian Austin Lambert. As science investigates the natural environment, it also modifies it, and that modification may have incalculable consequences for evil as well as good. Weather modification is the act of intentionally manipulating or altering the weather. The most common form of weather modification is cloud seeding, which increases rain or snow, usually for the purpose of increasing the local water supply. However, the single most important thing in weather modification is clouds. Why? For making the fresh water in the form of rain and snow, and heat retention and reflection. It's called cloud feedback. So high clouds trap more heat and reflect sunlight. Low clouds reflect more sunlight and retain less heat. All right, so the incoming solar radiation, 51% is absorbed by the surface of the Earth. 4% is reflected back from the surface. The atmosphere reflects back about 6%, and the clouds reflect about 20% of incoming light, and it absorbs another 19%. So 39% to 40% of solar radiation is absorbed or reflected back from clouds. Anyone who has ever slept outside knows how on a clear night it gets cold, and on an overcast night it stays warmer. Clouds act like a blanket to keep heat in and are also used as a reflector to keep heat in the form of direct sunlight out. So they can deflect the intense heat with clouds to try to reduce temperature, and they can also use clouds to disperse and retain heat where colder temperatures are a problem. Clouds, so beautiful and harmless looking, but hold the key to weather modification. Clouds have multiple purposes or objectives for the controllers. 1. Fresh water, rain and snow. 2. Sunlight reflection. 3. Sunlight absorption. 4. Heat dispersion. And 5. Visually obscuring the sun and moon to hide the signs for the MCO. I will get into that in a later video. Next video, part 25D, chemtrails, on the flat Earth. Part 25D, chemtrails on the flat Earth. What chemtrails are not. Chemtrails are not a means to poison the air and kill the population. Rational thought, folks. Remember, even the controllers have to breathe the air. They are not poisoning the only supply of air that everyone has to breathe. Are there other objectives the controllers use chemtrails for? Absolutely, but it is not to kill their property and slaves. Again, that would be you. The MCO will take care of that. So what are chemtrails? Just a cheaper and more efficient way of making clouds. Here's a before and after picture of chemtrails turning into clouds. And here's another picture of before, during, and after of the sky, chemtrails, and then clouds being formed. There are private companies that make clouds and modify the weather like this one, called Weather Modification Incorporated. On their About Us tab, this is what it says. Now, more than ever, the worldwide need for solutions to atmospheric necessities, such as water resource management and environmental quality monitoring, is critical. With nearly a half century of successful programs, our experience speaks for itself. A half century, private companies have been doing that, including the ones listed here, and this is just A through N. There are dozens and dozens of companies worldwide that are private and modify the weather. Now, if you were a controller, would you leave it up to the free market and private industry to control the weather? And would you use planes like this one that leaves trails like this to form clouds? Or would you enhance your capabilities by what is already out there to really modify the weather and leave trails like this? There are an average of 9,728 passenger planes in the sky at any given time. Chemtrails are worldwide. Yes, even in England, Switzerland, Italy, Israel, Russia, China, etc. Everywhere planes fly. The controllers are using the world's passenger jets to covertly, not really, if people would get their head out of their asses, to modify the weather by creating more clouds. The sun focal point is tightening and getting hotter, so they are using clouds to mitigate and disperse the heat. The objectives of passenger airliners: 1. To make clouds quickly and cheaply. 2. To use petroleum-based fuels. 3. Cheap and fast transportation for passengers. 4. Cheap and fast transportation of products. 5. To fleece the people, slaves, out of money by convincing them to take vacations to faraway destinations that are pointless. 6. To take away freedoms in the name of safety. 7. To have fucking power-tripping losers grope people for no reason. Sorry for that little rant. I have only flown twice since 9/11 because I don't want to support that industry or the Orwellian measures that they have put in place since. One flight was an absolute must, though, the flight to LA to be with Mia. Next video, Part 25E, How Clouds Form on the Flat Earth. Part 25E, How Clouds Form on the Flat Earth. Brian, you say to yourself, why do we need to know how clouds form? Oh, how clouds form is so important to how your world really works. Clouds cannot form without particulates. You need particulates: dust, salt, pollen, smoke, exhaust, pollutants, etc., with water vapor and a temperature below the dew point so that the air is saturated and clouds can form. How clouds form. Clouds form when warm, moist air rises and cools. Water vapor condenses on tiny particles to form liquid water or ice crystals. 1. Warm, moist air rises from the surface. As air rises, it cools. 2. At a certain height, air cools to the dew point and condensation begins. 3. Water vapor condenses on tiny particles, particulates, in the air, forming a cloud. Air pollution comes from a wide variety of sources. Some of the most excessive sources include vehicle or manufacturing exhaust, forest fires, volcanic eruptions, dry soil erosion, and other natural sources. building, construction, or demolition. Atmospheric aerosol. Aerosol is just another word for a particulate. Here's all the different ways that the particulates can get up into the atmosphere, and they have to be up there in order for water vapor to form on something. There has to be tiny particles of matter for water to form on. So the air or atmosphere has to have particulates. Particulates like this, and this, and this, and this, and this. Chemtrails are just another way to make clouds. People, you need to start trusting your senses again. The answers are simple. If you see clouds being formed from chemtrails, why do you need anyone to tell you what chemtrails are? So the jet planes are leaving particulates from their engine exhaust. And this is the end result if the air temperatures are right. The controllers cannot modify the weather without clouds, and to make the clouds, they need as many particulates, or pollutants, in the air as possible. No particulates equals no clouds equals no precipitation. Next video, part 25F, ground-based cloud factories on the flat Earth. Part 25F, ground-based cloud factories on the flat Earth. Since we are covering clouds, anything else seem bizarre? When they were trying to program me in the indoctrination centers called schools in the 1980s, this is how many cloud types there were. 4 types of clouds: cumulus, cirrus, nimbus, stratus. And now you have all of these. So in the last 30 some odd years, new cloud types have been forming. I guess that's the evolution of clouds. But you have to look at who's naming them. NOAA and NASA. Now there are 32 types of clouds. 32, interesting number. The freezing point of water and the highest level of the Masonic order. All right, on to the topic at hand, ground-based cloud factories. Most people believe that the weather has only been modified since the mid-1900s or so, due to the advancement of airplane technology. You do not need planes to modify the weather. I'm sure most of you have seen this. This is the NASA cloud making machine. I believe it's in Alabama. This is just one of many different ways to make clouds. And then there's all the other ways to get the particulates up in the air for the clouds to form on. NASA is just a little late to the party. Here's some other ways clouds can form. Like this. And this. And this. And this. Those pictures are all of power plants. How a power plant works. There's 2 things that come out of them besides electricity, and sometimes electricity going in them. In the cooling tower comes out water vapor in the form of clouds because it's steam. And from the chimney stack comes particulates, or also known as pollution. Tangent. Just because you see power lines coming from certain factories, i.e. nuclear, that does not mean the electricity is coming from the plant. There are 62,000 power plants all over the world. That includes coal, oil, natural gas. All of those power plants put up particulates into the air, or pollution. So this process of factories making clouds and particulates/pollution to modify the weather has been going on since The Industrial Revolution of the late 1700s and 1800s is when the controllers started to modify the weather in the current blue sky system. Let that one sink in for a while. The Industrial Revolution ground-based factories were very efficient at getting large amounts of particulates into the air, but dispersing those particulates evenly over vast distances, they needed other means. The controllers have always had a particulate problem. Civilization has to generate particulates to form clouds and make the precipitation to have fresh water. Pollution equals particulates equals clouds equals precipitation. No precipitation equals no fresh water to drink, no water for crops, and no water for domesticated animals. Tough to build a civilization without fresh water. Go figure. Pollution is actually a necessity for life and civilization. Main objectives of factories. 1. To get particulates/pollution in the air. 2. Create clouds for precipitation. 3. To burn fossil fuels/petroleum. 4. Create energy/electricity. 5. Employ the slaves. 6. Create useless petroleum-based products for the slaves to buy and for the slaves to willingly give back their wages to the controllers. Next video, part 25G, Transportation on the Flat Earth. Part 25G, Transportation on the Flat Earth. So ground-based cloud factories have a huge drawback: dispersion. So the controllers of old had to find ways to disperse the particulates through colonization and expansion. Here's America in the 1830s. America's industry and population were all out east, so expansion west and manifest destiny were the goals of the 1800s. So through expansion and transportation, the controllers were able to disperse their particulates worldwide. During the 1800s worldwide, the controllers used coal and wood-burning steam engines on trains to disperse particulates and people to lands that were devoid of industrial civilization. So railways were the most efficient means on land. So in the 1800s, the railways took off all over the world, and especially the United States. Today, there are over 141,000 miles of railway in the US alone. On rivers, lakes, and coastal areas, the controllers used coal and wood-burning steam engines on steamships during the 1800s. Transportation by water has always been cheaper and quicker than by land, but there are always limits to where they could go. By the turn of the century, metal-hulled ships took over, and fleets of coal-burning warships were traversing the oceans worldwide during the European colonization and expansion. For passengers, they eventually created huge passenger ships like the Lusitania and the Titanic to transport peoples throughout the world. And if you think those particulate-making ships are no longer, think again. Particulate-making ships are still a necessity for the controllers over large bodies of water. There are about 1 million ships and boats, not including recreational boats, in the world. With Ford, around the turn of the century, came the automobile age. Cars allowed an even more dispersed method of particulate spreading. Railways are like the main arteries, and roadways became the capillaries into the really remote areas. So hence the rise of the suburbs in the 1950s, and eventually even the remotest of areas with off-roading vehicles and trucks. There are over 1 billion passenger cars in the world in use today. Subsistence living was done away with, and consolidation of goods into grocery stores and malls. That assured the use of diesel-powered heavy trucks to haul said goods throughout the country and world. In the undeveloped areas, heavy equipment, bulldozers, excavators, dump trucks, etc., were spreading particulates. And the military handles the worst of the lands for bases and training, and spread worldwide to countries that were not on board with the controller's agenda. And deep in the suburbs, they have a secret weapon to spread the particulates. You, the slaves. Lawn and property maintenance. Don't forget about all the other things with particulate making engines. Lawnmowers, push and riding, motorcycles, weed eaters, chainsaws, blowers, snow blowers, generators, barbecues, etc. Then, with the advent of air travel, the controllers got their most efficient means of dispersion. They could deposit the particulates at elevation and create routes wherever they needed them. There are about 40,000 large passenger, cargo, and military planes worldwide, not including light aircraft, carrying over 4.1 billion passengers annually. If you think chemtrails are a recent thing, you'd be dead wrong. All of these photos are from World War II. So the controllers just needed to subsidize all of their transportation efforts. The controllers got the slaves to do the work and to pay for it at the same time. How? By convincing them through patriotism, religion, marketing, advertisements, peer pressure, programming, indoctrination, etc. The controllers convinced the slaves they needed to move to a certain place, take a vacation to some exotic land, buy that third car, get that huge house, manicure their lawn, get those Air Jordans for their kid, eat organic, buy cheap, crappy products from Walmart, etc., etc., etc. The controllers convinced all their slaves that they could be more than a slave via money, status, fame, celebrity, wealth, awards, accolades, etc. And all the slaves bought it, hook, line, and sinker. Because the controllers know the slaves do not know the difference between wants and needs. Next video, part 25H, greenhouse and CO2 on the flat Earth. Part 25H, greenhouse and CO2 on the flat Earth. The greenhouse effect is just another ridiculous theory in a sea of BS theories the controllers program everyone with. So what is CO2 and why has it been all over the news in the last few decades? Let's start with what it is not. CO2 is not a greenhouse gas, and even if it were, it's only 0.28% of what's in the atmosphere. The largest greenhouse gas, which is the wrong term, the heat retention thing in the atmosphere, is water vapor. Clouds and water vapor. 95% of the atmosphere heat is held in by water, and that doesn't even include the waters above. In most cases, the answers are so simple. So what is CO2 then? It is plant food. Everybody learned this in grade school. Carbon dioxide is one of the things that plants need to grow. So why are the controllers making plant food a bad thing? because a world thick with heavy vegetation all over the place would be a very bad thing with the impending conflagration fires caused by the electromagnetic plasma changeover event, or EMCO. Next video, part 25I, particulate problem on the flat earth. Part 25H1, the model on the flat earth. All right, hey everyone. All right, so I'm going to discuss the model in this video. And by the tab that you guys went into, you're going to understand that I am choosing to go and finish off the Sun series. And here is my logic and reasoning behind that. I went back and I watched a majority of the videos. I watched the Moon series again. I watched the Sun series again and some other ones. But the Sun series has stuff for both type of members. The members that want to survive and the members that just want to learn more about the model. And I'm pretty close to finishing off that. I don't know how many more parts, but it's pretty close to being done. So I'm going to finish off that series, and that will appease everyone. And then when I'm done with that one, I'm going to go on to expansion. Again, the reason why I'm going to do the expansion next is one, because Kimberly is going to be starting up the Master and Controller series on her site, and knowing the model even better on the expansion side of it will help you understand what she's going to be discussing in the Masters and Controllers series. And it has a lot of stuff that will help you with survival when you understand the expansion, and it gets even deeper into the model. And then the last thing I'm going to finish off when I get done with those two series is I'm going to finish off the Moon series. And the Moon series is the one that is the least important right now. And I know a lot of people are going to be bummed about that, but it really is the least important. And after watching the Moon series and watching the Safe Zone series, I went into in depth on the model, and that should have explained. So it was kind of the continuation of the Moon series, because when you understand the model, you understand how our dome and plane works and how theirs works. So yeah, I'll finish off the Moon series to answer some major questions that I've already answered in the Epiphany section and everything else, just to tidy it up and put a bow on it so everybody's really happy. But that's why I'm going to focus in on this video on the model, because I don't think people quite understand what the importance of the model is. And after talking to Kimberly the other day, she was telling me that she didn't, when we first started this, she didn't even know what a model was. So hence, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to explain what a model is and why having the model, you all should be able to fit the puzzle pieces together, because the model is what allows you to do that. So when you have the correct model and you understand how all the parts work, then you can plug in, so if you have a question about stars, if you have a question about the moon or anything else, volcanoes or something else, you can plug it into that model and you should be able to get the same result if you understand the model. And that's why, I spent a lot of time discussing it in the Safe Zone series, and I thought it was pretty explanatory. But I'll go into it again here just to make sure that everybody kind of gets the concept of it, because that's the key. The key is not to keep on asking questions about the model. The key is understanding the model, and then you can answer your own questions. Hence the reason why I've been pushing thinking so much. So that just doesn't go with the model, that goes with survival. If you understand the model, then you'll understand the challenges that you're going to face, and you don't need to memorize the order of how everything goes down during the EMCO. If you understand the model, you'll know the order, and you'll know all the things and how they can only happen that way because of the model and the way things work. So that's what this is about, and I'm going to try to do my best to explain it so you guys completely understand the importance of the model. Right? When you guys came into the site, it was to get the model. The model was never released on YouTube, and that is what you're trying to get all of your answers or your questions answered from that model. So you don't need me to explain how everything works. You can plug in the questions and you'll get the correct answer. The truth can't be told. It has to be realized. And I want to thank Isha from Nepal that put this in an email or a comment. I believe the comment may have been on in Kimberly's site. And Kimberly had heard this quote before. It sounds very Buddhist. It's probably a Buddhist teaching. I had never heard it before, but when Isha had put this in there, I was like, yes, that's correct. I can't tell you the truth. You have to realize the truth. I can show you the model, but you have to understand and realize how the model works. And when you get that, then you're on the path to understanding everything, because you will be able to answer the questions for yourself because you have realized the truth. So, what is a model? The definition is a three-dimensional representation of a person or thing, or of a proposed structure, typically on a smaller scale than the original. So what is the 100% correct working model of everything? Well, it's this. It's a dome within a dome. LaPlante's work, when you understand where the things are, how the things relate to each other, and why they're important and how they cause the things that we see in our natural world. It goes beyond LaPlante's work because one of the things that you have to understand in the model is electromagnetism, plasma physics, and optics. Optics is a key, especially to the moon and everything that we see in our nighttime sky, and including our daytime sky, because that's optics with a focal point. So when you understand that the plasma tube of light is spiraling, and you understand that the plasma tube of light comes out from the connection of the confinement dome to the flip ring, and if you've watched LaPlante's work, you'll understand that that plasma tube of light will come from the flip ring down towards the outside part, towards the top of that dome that it's coming down from. So that's everything in a nutshell. You'll understand where the light comes from, what's generating the light, where the photons are, where the domes are, and that is everything that you need to know to answer your questions as far as how does everything work that you see. Now, some people may interpret the model different than myself, and that is completely fine. Where I believe the moon is in the model as I see it, somebody may see it differently, and they may think it's a different thing. Case in point, I have a member down here in San Diego who sent me a very wonderful email about a month ago, and he said that he had an epiphany where he believed that the dome that we see in the sky that we call the moon is actually our dome. And if that works for him, that's great, because he may be correct. I believe it's different, right? My interpretation of the model and how it works is different than his. However, it doesn't mean that I didn't see or think the same thing as him years ago when I was looking at this. I looked at it as it was our dome and it was an optical reflection that we were seeing inside of our dome. Now, I moved past that because I realized everything didn't fit and work properly with that. But it's the fact that he was sitting there and thinking about how it works. And it's a process to get to that realization of how it all works. Understand the model, and you can answer your own questions. That's all I got for this one. The next video in the 25 series will be put up on Friday. Tomorrow we have a member that has drove cross country from New York State that we are going to be meeting with, and we want to give him as much time as we possibly can. So I will do the next video on Friday. All right, thanks guys. Next video, part 25I, particulate problem on the flat Earth. Part 25I, particulate problem on the flat Earth. Since the last EMCO, red sky to blue sky, clouds have not formed naturally. The natural sky should have always looked like this, a clear blue sky. Natural clouds only form from the plasma arcing during the pre-EMCO and post phases of the Earth cycle. The natural fires from the conflagration during the pre-EMCO and post phases, along with the volcanic ash, were and are the natural ways for getting particulates into the atmosphere for clouds to form in conjunction with the plasma arcing. But the controllers cannot recreate civilization without clouds and fresh water to water crops, livestock, and people. The controllers have to manipulate the weather and create clouds for an efficient means to disperse fresh water. And the storage of said fresh water in the colder regions of the world at elevation in the form of snow and mountains. This provides a steady stream of fresh water from snow melt through the growing season of spring and early summer. For 200 plus years, they, the controllers, have had to artificially create the clouds to create, transport, and store the precipitation and fresh water around the world. Civilization cannot function efficiently without clouds and precipitation, so the controllers were and are forced to saturate the air with particulates. Particulates/pollution is a great thing for civilization during the calm periods between the EMCOs. However, it is a deadly problem during the pre-EMCO and EMCO phases of our natural cycle. Why? Because the byproduct of plasma is water, or H2O. as the controllers have modified the weather and created clouds that are not natural. They have also increased the amount of CO2 or carbon dioxide for plant life to feed on, and have supplied natural vegetation with the fresh water through precipitation, and have created vast areas of forests, jungles, and very thick vegetation or fuel. And if everybody remembers from grade school what plant life and vegetation emits, they emit oxygen. And lots of oxygen, the more vegetation there is. Oxygen is great for us to breathe, but it bonds with hydrogen to form more water and is the other main part for fire. More particulates / pollution equals increases in carbon dioxide or CO2 in the atmosphere and clouds for precipitation. More CO2 and precipitation equals more plant food and fresh water, which equals more plant life and wild vegetation. More plant life equals more oxygen and fuel for conflagration fires. Next video, part 25J, oxygen equals fire and water on the flat earth. Part 25J, oxygen equals fire and water on the flat earth. The best way to predict the future is to create it. Abraham Lincoln. If you create the weather, then it is easy to predict the weather. However, when something else starts to create the natural weather, like the plasma, then the weather becomes unpredictable. For decades now, the controllers have made the evil culprit out to be CO2, carbon dioxide, calling it a greenhouse gas and causing climate change. CO2, or carbon dioxide, is not a greenhouse gas, and it is not causing climate change. The controllers can't ever tell the truth, but they do indirectly tell you what is going on. CO2 leads to increased plant life, which is the real enemy because it creates fuel and oxygen for the conflagration fires. Oxygen is what the controllers are trying to control and limit. Every fire needs these three ingredients: fuel, oxygen, and heat or spark. By demonizing CO2, the controllers can still implement their plan of reducing plant life or fuel and oxygen levels in the atmosphere leading up to the conflagration fires. Because the heat or spark will be provided by the plasma and the sun to ignite the fuel and oxygen. Oxygen creates a twofold problem for the controllers to manage and the population to contend with. The first and main problem is water. So more plant life releasing oxygen into the atmosphere, then there is more oxygen to bond with hydrogen. When the plasma starts its arcing in the atmosphere, it produces its natural byproduct of water, the natural way for precipitation to form on our plane, which means more torrential rains, more hail and greater sizes of hail, which means more flash floods, more floods and standing waters that will rise, and more fields that can't be planted and destroy any remaining crops that were planted. Remember, just because our genetically modified crops can't deal with those conditions and amount of water does not mean other natural vegetation can't. There are all kinds of natural seeds everywhere and plenty of hardy weeds and aquatic plants that will thrive. The second problem with too much oxygen is on the conflagration fire side. More vegetation or plant life means more fuel for the conflagration fires, along with the hotter focal point. Will quickly dry out the plant life and make it highly combustible. And now all you need is the spark, which the plasma provides so efficiently around the plane. And now you have all the key ingredients for the conflagration fires. Let me show you what increased oxygen will do to a fire.
We are breathing. Now let's see what happens to the cigarette and how it burns when we introduce medical-grade oxygen. Notice that the cigarette is burning much more quickly. It's burning much faster and hotter than it was on room air that we breathe. You may have noticed a white-hot flame that indicates a flame temperature measured in thousands of degrees Fahrenheit. Notice that the article of clothing does not catch on fire very quickly. Please notice how much more rapidly the patient's skin as well as clothing would catch on fire with oxygen used while smoking with oxygen in place. The covering of the pipe cleaner will be his clothing. Let's see what happens when an ember is introduced from one of his cigarettes. The fire was very impressive. However, the fire you just saw was far hotter than a normal oxygen fire. Oxygen-enriched fires burn between 1,500 and 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit, or even more depending on the materials involved. This much heat will cause serious injuries.
Did you catch that note? Oxygen fires burn at 1,500 to 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Oxygen, what the controllers really fear, and for a very good reason. Fire and water. Next video, part 25K, electromagnetism and fire on the flat Earth. Part 25K, electromagnetism and fire on the flat Earth. Refresher, what is plasma exactly? It is just electricity that charges the gases around it. Where does electricity come from? From the living body you live in, or Bob. Or even more specifically, the electrical signals inside of the neuron of its brain. Electricity and electromagnetic radiation can also create fire from water. How do you make fire out of water? By splitting the molecule into its base parts, hydrogen and oxygen. Method number 1, electrolysis. Not going to get heavy into the science behind this. If you want to learn more, look up electrolysis. But you need a power source, direct current, you need an acid-base solution, you need an anode and a cathode, and the particles will split, and one hydrogen will go to one of the rods, and oxygen will go to the other rod. Another way is electrolysis with salt water as the solution. You can even do it with a battery in the solution. Bubbles forming are hydrogen and oxygen on the battery connectors. So that's how we get water to split into hydrogen and oxygen.
A portable device that makes fire from water has been developed within a European research project. It doesn't use flammable gases, it produces its own fuel as needed.
This is an electrolyser system we've got here. It's been developed to use a standard mains electricity supply and water. The water is split into hydrogen and oxygen gases and fed into a torch where a flame is produced, which can then be used for brazing or any other industrial application where a flame is used. So it's just using water to make a flame, basically.
Hydrogen and oxygen are recombined at the very tip of the torch, creating a flame that's cooler and much easier to handle than commonly used mixtures of oxygen with propane or acetylene. Hydrogen-based flame is more gentle and cleaner too, because it only produces water when it burns.
So what else does electricity and electromagnetism do? It emits radiation. Not going to get heavy on the science, but it goes from gamma rays, X-rays, ultraviolet, visible light that we see, infrared, microwaves, and radio waves. On the right-hand side are the radio waves. Method number 2, radio waves, or radio frequencies. Electromagnetic radiation, radio waves, also splits the water molecule into hydrogen and oxygen. Look at what this inventor did with electromagnetic radiation, radio waves, salt water, and a spark.
You have enough in it? His machine could actually burn salt water. John Kansas discovered that his radio frequency generator could release the oxygen and hydrogen from salt water and create an incredibly intense flame.
Just like that. If that was inside a car cylinder, you could see the amount of fire that would be in the cylinder. I can put my hand in here.
Put your hand into the beam, nothing happens. Put in a fluorescent bulb and it lights up immediately. Top engineers have checked out John's amazing invention and they were amazed.
And we saw it go up to 1,500 degrees centigrade, the temperature. And it's incredible.
This simple Stirling engine is running with the heat generated by the flames coming off that test tube. The fuel, nothing more than salt water.
This is the most abundant element in the world, water. And salt water is everywhere. And to see it burn actually gives me chills.
So imagine the possibilities. Salt water as the ultimate clean fuel.
So when the electromagnetic radiation gets high enough during the EMCO, the electromagnetic radiation can split salt water into hydrogen and oxygen, releasing copious amounts of those two gases back into the atmosphere. And with the plasma arcing, providing the spark to the highly conductive salt water. The hydrogen gas, which is extremely flammable, will ignite. And I just showed you what increased oxygen does to a fire. Saltwater bodies will ignite and burn at the surface during the EMCO. Revelation 20:14-15, King James Version. And death and hell were cast into the lake of fire. This is the second death. And whosoever was not found written in the book of life was cast into the lake of fire. Just another reason to stay away from the coastlines of the oceans, seas, and salt lakes of the world. Also, stay away from dried up salt flats, which are old dried up salt lakes, because those will refill with the rainwater and become saltwater lakes again. Salt deposits in the United States. Salt domes.
Everybody needs to go back and watch the entire series again, starting with part